Hello everyone, my name is Amber. Welcome to my channel, Amber Reads Romance. Today I am here with my weekly wrap-up. I am going to go over all the books that I read for that last week of February, although March 1st was one of the days. So this is my wrap-up, basically finishing out February. Let's go ahead and get started with my weekly reads. Okay, guys, so for this last week of February, I basically read 7 books. I did finish one on the 1st, but so 7 books for this last week. Honestly, like I had a tough time this week. I had to call out sick for a couple days because I did have a really bad migraine and nausea, and I just didn't really get any reading done those days. So anyways, had a really good week otherwise besides that. And besides having to go back to the dentist again because I might have nerve damage from all the dental work I had done last year. So pretty stressed otherwise. So I just was kind of all over the place this week, but still a pretty decent week reading wise. So let's go ahead and start with my books. So the first book that I read was Dallas by Rachelle Mills. This has been on my TBR for months, because this is actually the second part of the romance between Raya and Dallas. And the first book was Clayton. And that book was so angsty and like just put me through like torture. It was just so hard, but I gave it 5 stars. I don't know, it really killed me, but like in a good way, because Raya was actually her like mate, her, mate. That this is like a werewolf kind of like shifter type of romance, and her mate was actually Clayton, and he was in a long-term relationship with a girl that he's been with since he was like a little kid. And so when she discovers he's her mate and she goes up to him, he completely rejects her, and her wolf kind of goes to like attack the woman that he's with, and she ends up getting in big trouble. She gets whipped in front of everybody and kind of spurned and like treated like horrible from her pack and all that kind of stuff. So it was very hard to read. And you would think like when I read that, I thought, oh, it's a rejected mate story and she'll be with Clayton. No, it's not a romance with Clayton. It's actually a romance with Dallas. And when she moved back, because she went away for years, moved back home because she had to help be the healer for the pack. She did not want to come back there, but she kind of had to because the alpha called her. So she came back, and she's like a midwife, basically, type of healer. And so she helps with the births and all of that. And she meets Dallas, and he's a doctor, and he had like lost his mate. She died. I think she died and when she was pregnant. I can't remember. But it was very tragic for him. And so he kind of thought he can never like have a good life or whatever, but he's drawn to Raya, and they really like come together and have this sweet romance. And so that one kind of ends in a slight cliffhanger where things are kind of up in the air. But she ends up in this book going to live with his family. So he came from a different pack, and so she goes to live with them, and he's still heading up the previous pack where they were working because things went down with the alpha and Clayton and all that kind of stuff. So he's stuck there for the time being, and she goes with the parents where she's going to train because she never got proper training because she was just discarded by her pack. And so she goes through extensive fighting training, plus like they make her like turn into a wolf and go out in the wilds for like the winter. So she's going through a lot of training and missing her like new mate. But in this book, you have to deal with like she still has a mate alive. And so there's still that draw. She doesn't want to be with him, but like her body will tell her something else. So that kind of has to get resolved in this. This book is just heartbreaking. There's so many sad things in it because the man that she was mated to, Clayton, his girlfriend, that longtime girlfriend, ended up being the mate of one of Dallas's brothers, and she didn't want to be. And she has like a really difficult pregnancy in this. And so I'm just going to warn you, there's some trigger warnings for that. She's like basically like slowly dying with her depression and just, it's so sad. And I didn't really like her character, but you still felt bad for her for everything she's going through. So this one is, again, angsty. I can't go into too much of it because it's the second part of the book, but it just has a lot of like personal growth and journey that Raya has to go through to kind of come to herself, be strong on her own, but also to fight for what's best for her. And so I just think it's a really great journey for her. It is very sad and depressing and angsty. And so I didn't know for sure how I wanted to rate it, but I still really enjoyed the story and the characters. And it went places that I had no idea that this book was going to go there. So I do think it was very creative and different than other stuff that I've read. So I did end up giving this one 5 stars and 2.5 chilies. Okay, so then I listened to In Bed with the Earl by Christi Caldwell. This is the first book in the Lost Lords of London. This is available on the Read and Listen for free. If you have KU, you can do that and it'll download to your Audible and you can listen to that for free. I think a lot of her books are like that. That's how I first started listening to her when I first got KU and I didn't have Audible Plus. So I would definitely check her out if you want to find some historical romances that you can get through KU. Anyways, in this one, this is between Malcolm and Verity, and Malcolm is actually the lost Earl of Maxwell. He was stolen as a child, and he kind of grew up in the gutters and made kind of a criminal empire for himself. So he's pretty powerful in that regard. And later on, he, as a grown-up, he finds out that he was actually supposed to be that Earl. And he doesn't really want anything to do with society and the money and the house and all being an Earl. And so he's kind of staying in hiding. And then we have Verity, and she is actually a reporter, a journalist. She's a working woman. She works really hard so that she can take care of her sister. Her mother was the mistress to a society. I don't know if he was an Earl or what he was, but he basically did nothing to do with them and didn't take care of them. So her and her sister had to fend for themselves after her mother died. And so she works really hard and is just very stressed. And so she gets basically it's a assignment that they know she's going to fail. And they make it so she needs to find the lost Earl and do a story on him. And nobody can find him. So she hears from somebody that he has something to do with going into the sewers and stuff. So she goes down there on her own, which is so stupid. But she does. And this one guy is going to kind of attack her. And the lost Earl ends up saving her and taking her back to his place. And they have this pretty amazing interaction and connection until he finds out that she's just she was actually after his story. And when she realized he's the lost Earl, that's really what she's focused on. So he feels very angry about that. So this is a lot of push and pull. Eventually things lead to kind of a fake marriage between them, because once the story gets revealed about him and he kind of blames her for it, now all the women are trying to come after him to marry their daughters. And she needs a place to stay because basically that paper fired her even though she got the information. So that's kind of the setup of this. This was okay. I enjoyed it, but I got kind of bored in the middle and some parts were kind of just losing their focus for me. I listened to an audiobook, so it was easier to get through, but I think I probably wouldn't have liked it as much as even that if I was physically reading it. So it was decent. It wasn't my favorite Christi Caldwell, but I ended up giving it 4 stars and 2.5 chilies. Okay, so then I read Loving Romeo by Laura Pavlov. Again, I just discovered Laura Pavlov last year when I got her ALCs for the Magnolia Falls series. I only got them for the last 2 books in the series, and it just blew me away. I loved those books so much. I loved Magnolia Falls. I love this group of friends. I love Beefcake. I loved it. So I was I need to go back and read the beginning of that series. So Loving Romeo is actually the first book in the Magnolia Falls series. And this follows Romeo and Demi. And Romeo is a fighter. He kind of did a little professional fighting, but he kind of ended that because of reasons like of things going on with his father. And he, runs like a gym and helps train other fighters in Magnolia Falls. And he has a pretty troubled past where he actually went to jail for a few years with his friend for something they didn't do. And this leads to reason he hates Demi, because Demi is actually from this prestigious, very like powerful family in Magnolia Falls. And they really were like somebody or the family was involved with kind of fucking him over, and where he went to prison and didn't get the help he needed. So he really blames Demi, even though she had nothing to do with it. So she comes back home after college, and she has opened up her own little coffee shop, and it's like super cute and she loves it, but it's right next door to his gym. So they have a couple run-ins, and he's a total asshole at the start, and she's just like, what did I do to this guy? And it really frustrates her because she's such a good person, and she's really worked for everything she has. It wasn't handed to her from her parents. And so, they do have a rough start, but he quickly realizes he's being fucked up for blaming her for something that happened from her family. And so they kind of become friends, and she's like kind of going to the gym to do some training because she does have some issues for somebody from her past that was like almost like sexually assaulted her. And so she does want to be able to like defend herself. So she starts going there, and they kind of have run-ins, and she's helping him with some of his training. She did go to school to like learn health and like diet and all of that. So she's trying to help him with his training for a big fight, because this one fighter is like throwing his name around and wants him to come back and fight him. And so he didn't really want to, but it's just nonstop. So now he has to. So he's really got a limited time to seriously train, get in shape, to be able to go toe to toe with a guy that's a professional boxer. And he's really hasn't been fighting professionally for, a long time. He was barely in it. So it is a very dangerous kind of thing for him. But he takes it very seriously. I loved all this stuff in this because a lot of time in boxing or fighting things, it's barely brought up. Like, oh, he's a fighter. It is heavily, like a lot of this book is him going through training, her helping with training, his diet, like his whole lifestyle. So I really loved that part of this. Now, what I loved about this was how sweet they were together. Like once Romeo realized he's a F up, he really, makes amends. And they really are so sweet together. Like Romeo was freaking adorable, and he's so protective over her. And the other thing that I loved about this was when it is revealed why he hated her, like why he hated her family, she immediately believes him. She doesn't doubt him. She doesn't make conflict with him over this. She goes to the source and confronts her family. And when she learns the truth, she stands by Romeo. And I fucking loved that. There is no third act breakup in this. There is a conflict, some suspense elements, but her and Romeo are just so perfect together. And then you have the introduction of Beefcake, which is the kid, one of the kids. He changed his name to Beefcake, and he like flirts with her, and is just so freaking adorable. I loved him in, the book that was being his dad's book. Loved him. And to see him again in the first book, and what a charmer and sweet kid this is. I just adore Beefcake. He steals the show. I freaking love him. So needless to say, I fucking loved this book, and I'm so annoyed with myself that I have just discovered Laura Pavlov, because this Magnolia Falls series is so good. So make sure you read it if you haven't picked these up yet. I know I didn't listen to the audiobook for this one, but the last two, the audiobooks were fantastic. So anyways, I gave this one 5 stars, and it was 3 chilies. Okay, so then I read a quick little novella. I listened to an audiobook. This is Releasing Maladek, and this is actually 5.5 in the Clickanian series, which I've been loving. I ended up buying a bunch of these on Audible when they had a sale. So I had this one, and this is between Maladek and Katie. Maladek you actually met in Using Feiho, and he gets stuck on this planet, which is like he's kind of held prison there. And I think it's Saligi. I can't remember how they say it, but they kind of have this song that they can like fuck people and like if they hear it, they do whatever, but the humans aren't affected by it. So he's actually trapped on that planet. And then we have Katie, and she was a human. She was taken like 15 years ago. But now she's basically kind of like a servant to a prince. And they're doing like this traveling like type of cruise type of thing in space. And they actually get lured by the sounds, and they crash land kind of like on that planet. And she ends up finding him in his like cell. And so she frees him in order for him to help her. But he immediately recognized that she's his mate. So they do have their like fated mates in this. And so they're trying to get off this planet, get help to the other people that were taken and all that kind of stuff. And it was very quick. It was cute. She didn't fight their mating at all. He's very big, and they had some good times together. It was pretty spicy. This is narrated by Stephen Dexter, who is one of my favorite narrators. I discovered him when I actually listened to the first book in this series, which was Choosing Theo. So I think he does the entire series, and he's fantastic. Like, I love him. So I had a good time with this, but I mean, it is a novella. It didn't blow me away, but I was happy to see Maladek get his happily ever after we were introduced to him in the previous book. So I ended up giving that one 4 stars and 3 chilies. Okay, so on to the next one, which kind of took me on a different place. I was not planning to read this at all. This is One is a Promise by Pam Godwin. And my thing that was on my TBR was actually Devastate. And that was I think the 4th book in the Deliver series. But I go to Goodreads all the time, check people's reviews out before I start them. And I did see somebody's review, and they did say that so this One is a Promise is the first book in the Tangled Lies series. And this is a trilogy that's like a love triangle, which I was always scared to pick this up, even though it's Pam Godwin and I love her. I was nervous because I don't really love love triangles. But that person's review said that the man that she doesn't pick in this love triangle gets his HEA in the Deliver series, and he gets introduced in Devastate. So I didn't want to ruin that for me. So I decided to put that to the side, and I'm going to read this love triangle in March. So I got to finish it. I still got to read the other 2, and I wanted to buy them immediately, but I had to get to some arcs for March. So, this is the first book in the love triangle, and this is about Danny. She is actually like a dancer. She does like belly dancing, competitive dancing. She's like an actual like really talented dancer, and it is told in the current timeline and then some flashbacks because she has gone through a lot. She was engaged, and her fiance Cole went away for like a job. It seems like he has like some secret government type of job because he went to like Iraq for a year, and he was supposed to be back, and he never returned. And then she was told that he had died. So she went through a lot of suffering, a lot of depression. She's having a hard time moving on. And so now she's at the point, it's been a couple years, that she's going to try and finally date. You know, her sister's really pushing her to date and get out there and stop living in the past. So she ends up going on this date. It's not going great, but the date gets interrupted by this man named Trace, and he is a casino owner, and he wants her to work for him. And she's like, sorry, like, you don't just get to show up at my house, interrupt my date, like, scare my date off and offer me this job. Like, I already have a job. And he basically bought the restaurant that she did this belly dancing performance. He bought it and he's going to open up the restaurant in the casino and he wants her to dance there, which already seems pretty shady. You're like, he must know her. Why is he obsessed with her? Why did he, do all this? But he ends up talking her into taking the job because he offers her a ton of money, way more than she would ever get. So it's like a little crazy. But she ends up going work for him and they have this intense attraction and there's a lot of push and pull between them because Trace is constantly pushing her away, but then pulling her back in. So it's like, she's just like getting mind fucked by this guy. But she really starts to fall for him. They do have some really sweet moments, but then he'll be a dick again, so it's just this constant back and forth. And eventually, like, he does want to go there with her, but he doesn't want to be with her when she's still hung up on her ex. So she's going to have to try and move on. And, we have flashbacks of her and her ex. They had this whirlwind romance. They were only together for 10 months, but they were like insanely in love. And, it really wrecked her when she lost him. So now that when things are finally going to get settled or be okay with Trace, who's going to show back up? I'm not giving anything away. It's pretty obvious. That's what ends up happening is her dead fiance comes back from the dead and that's it. So this one ends in a cliffhanger with like no resolution. So just be prepared for that. Basically, you need to get all 3 of the books. I was dying to get right into it, but I still had other stuff to read. I will be having a vlog of this, but I'm not sure when that will go up because I'm waiting till I read all 3 of them. But I was hooked to this. I couldn't put it down. I didn't love Danny at first, but Pam always gets me to churn around on characters that I don't really like at first. She's just such a phenomenal writer. She's my favorite. So, of course, in Pam we trust, and I am going to finish this love triangle. So I ended up giving it 5 stars because it was just so angsty, like the toxic relationship, the like drama, it was just everything. Like I loved it. I love the wildness. I loved it. So anyways, 5 stars and then 3.5 chilies. Okay, so then I listened to another audiobook. This one I've had on my TBR for a long time too and still hadn't gotten to. And that was Without You by Marley Valentine. This is an romance, but it's very emotional and it deals with a lot of tough topics like grief and loss. So just a trigger warning for that if you're, have lost anybody. But this is between Deacon and Julian. And Deacon, his brother died. I can't remember if it was leukemia, something like that. And so his brother was actually with Julian. They were actually best friends and neighbors, I think, growing up. And then he became his boyfriend. So, Deacon and Julian are both like struggling with the loss of him. And Deacon never really liked Julian because he kind of felt like he was more accepted into their family than he was. He always felt like the outsider and like they loved Julian more. And so he kind of had some petty irritation with Julian. But when he sees how wrecked Julian was, he tries to comfort him like after the death of his brother. And then now it's like a year later and he's back for kind of like the year anniversary. And he does not have a good relationship with his parents. Let me just tell you, this mother is a fucking bitch. I hated her. She's a monster. But anyways, he ends up running into Julian and they kind of keep hanging out and they really have this great connection and banter. And he's like physically attracted to Julian and he's never been into a guy before, but he's totally open to it. And so they end up just falling for each other and trying to kind of be together. They are bonded through like their loss of his brother. And so, but like their connection was on a deeper level than what Julian had with his brother. So it was very emotional, sweet. It did kind of fall off at one point where it was like the first half I was really invested and then it kind of went down a little bit. But honestly, it was still really, really good. I thought it was emotional. It was my first book by Marley Valentine, so I'm definitely impressed. The spicy times were hot. I love my sex scenes. There was some hot stuff in this. So I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars and 3.5 chilies. Okay, so the last one that I read, which would end up finishing it on the 1st of March, was Deal with the Devil by Deborah Garland. I got an ALC for this one from the author agency. And this is the first book in the Astoria Royals series. This is a mafia series. I've never read this author, so I was excited to give this author a try. And I really enjoyed this. I had a good time with this audiobook. This is about Lachlan and Katya. And Lachlan is he's in the Irish mafia. He's an enforcer. He used to want to be a priest, but he ended up killing a priest that was abusing kids. So he didn't get to go that route, and he became the enforcer for like his brother's, Irish mafia. And he actually has a run-in with Katya one night. She's at her sister's like 21st birthday, but she's kind of always seen in the background. She's in the shadows because she's actually the illegitimate daughter of the Bratva leader, the Pecan, and she is just kind of the other one, And so, but luckily because of that, she gets to kind of pursue being a ballerina and go to school and stuff because he doesn't really care. But he has a run-in with her and he's very entranced with her. So he kind of watches her from afar for a couple years. I think it's a couple years. And then her sister ends up going on the run, kind of escaping because she doesn't want to be in an arranged marriage. But now that puts Katya in a bad situation where she's going to have to be in an arranged marriage. So once Lachlan finds out about this, he sees this jerk like screwing chicks at the strip club. And then he sees her the next day and she has bruises all over her face because he beat her. He's also has a mistress that's pregnant. It's just a mess. Like, she does not want to go into this. And so he's infuriated and he ends up bringing all his men with him to the wedding, stopping the wedding and marrying her instead. So now they are married and they're definitely going to go all the way with have a real marriage. They just don't know if it will really last because she was supposed to go to London she's trying to audition for ballet and all that stuff. And he wants her to pursue her dreams. So that's kind of the, like, what are they going to make it? Is everything going to be okay in this kind of dynamic? There's a lot of mafia stuff, some suspense elements. I really loved Lachlan. He was so protective and he was very into her. It's a he's too big trope too. So the sex was fun. It didn't blow me away, but I enjoyed it. I listened to it in a day and I have to say, I highly recommend the audio. So this was duet narrated, but it had a full cast. So the main characters were played by Troy Duran and Lexi Evans. And I didn't put all the other narrators here, but it does have a full cast for all the other characters. So it was definitely an amazing audiobook. I loved it. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And I think, sorry, I didn't put it here. I think it was 3.5 chilies. I had a really good time with it. It just wasn't fully a 5-star book for me, but I think it was a really good first book from this author that, an introduction for me. So I definitely want to continue with that series and see more from that author. I just actually requested another ALC from them. So hopefully I'll get that one too. But those are the books that I read this week. Hopefully this is a quicker video. But I have another video coming out, a special video coming out this week that I'm excited for you guys to see. So make sure you stay tuned for that. As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel. Make sure you leave a comment, and make sure you're subscribed to my channel if you are not already. All right, thank you guys. I will see you on the next one.